I'm 32 male, married, with a decent job in IT. Life's been pretty steady, or at least it was until last year when things started falling apart. My parents, mid-60s, have always been the kind of people who believed family was everything. That's how they justified what they did. But what they did didn't save the family. It destroyed it. And the fallout still hasn't settled. It started with my sister, who's 34, married for 6 years, no kids. She and her husband, who I'll call brother-in-law, were having trouble. Everyone knew that. They weren't happy, and it showed in every argument during holiday dinners or awkward silences when one of them got snippy. What we didn't know, or maybe I should say, what I didn't know, was that my sister was having an affair. I found out about it by accident. I was over at my parents' house, dropping off a package for them, and I overheard a conversation. My parents were sitting at the dining table with a man I didn't recognize. He looked smug, too comfortable for someone who didn't belong there. My mother was saying something like, "It's only a matter of time. Once she leaves him, you'll be free to be together. We're just helping her get there." It hit me immediately. This guy was my sister's affair partner, and my parents were encouraging it. I walked in and asked what the hell was going on. My mom turned pale, my dad tried to play it off like it was no big deal, and the guy, let's call him affair partner, just smirked. My mom finally said, "You don't understand, it's not like that. Your sister isn't happy, and he's the one she loves. We're just trying to support her." I was floored. I couldn't believe my parents were actively sabotaging her marriage. I told them they were out of their minds, that they were betraying brother-in-law in the worst possible way. My dad waved me off, saying, "You don't know the whole story. Brother-in-law isn't a good match for her. He doesn't make her happy." I left furious. My sister hadn't even told me about the affair, and now I was supposed to pretend this was okay? My parents kept inviting affair partner to family dinners, even while brother-in-law was still in the picture. They were playing both sides, pretending everything was fine when brother-in-law was around, then scheming behind his back. Things came to a head at Thanksgiving. Brother-in-law was there trying to make things work, and my sister was acting distant. Affair partner wasn't there, thankfully, but my parents kept making little comments about how people need to follow their hearts, and life's too short to be unhappy. Brother-in-law looked like he was barely holding it together. After dinner, I pulled my sister aside and asked her what the hell she was doing. She got defensive, saying it wasn't my business. I told her it became my business the moment our parents got involved and started disrespecting her husband. She snapped, "You don't know what it's like to be in a miserable marriage." I said, "Then leave him, but don't sneak around and drag mom and dad into it." She stormed off, and I thought that was the end of it. But my parents doubled down. They started inviting affair partner over more often, even when brother-in-law wasn't there. They'd sneak him into family events, claiming he was a friend. It was sickening. Then came the divorce. My sister finally told brother-in-law about the affair, and he was devastated. He filed for divorce immediately, and that's when my parents' plan started unraveling. Brother-in-law wasn't just going to roll over and let them play happy families with affair partner. He got a great lawyer and started digging into everything. That's when things got really ugly. My parents had been giving my sister money, helping her pay for things so she could start fresh. Brother-in-law found out and argued in court that it was marital money, that they were funding the affair. He subpoenaed financial records, and it turned out my parents had been moving money around to cover for her. The judge didn't take kindly to that. My sister ended up with a much smaller settlement than she expected, and brother-in-law got the house. My parents were furious, blaming him for being vindictive. I told them they brought it on themselves. You'd think that would be the end of it, but no. My parents couldn't let it go. They started bad-mouthing brother-in-law to anyone who would listen, even at church. They spread rumors that he was abusive, controlling, anything to justify their actions. It got so bad that brother-in-law threatened to sue them for defamation. And then came the twist. Affair partner wasn't the guy my parents thought he was. After my sister moved in with him, she found out he had been lying about his job, his finances, even his previous relationships. Turns out he had a habit of dating married women and then dumping them once things got too serious. He left her after 6 months. My sister was a wreck, and my parents were scrambling to pick up the pieces. They tried to blame affair partner, saying he tricked her, but I wasn't having it. I told them they enabled her. encouraged her to destroy her marriage. And for what? To end up alone and miserable? The final straw came when my parents tried to guilt me into helping her financially. They said, "She's your sister. Family helps family." I laughed and said, "You mean like how you helped her destroy her life?" "No thanks." Now, my relationship with my parents is basically non-existent. My sister barely speaks to me, and honestly, I don't care. They all made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences. If there's one thing I've learned from this mess, it's that enabling someone's bad behavior never ends well. My parents thought they were helping, but all they did was destroy trust, relationships, and our family. After cutting ties with my parents and distancing myself from my sister, I thought I'd finally get some peace. But it turned out my parents weren't done trying to meddle. They started reaching out to my wife, trying to guilt her into convincing me to help my sister. My wife, bless her, shut them down immediately. She told them flat out, "If you want help from us, you should have thought about that before you tore the family apart." That wasn't the answer they wanted. My mom called me the next day, crying, saying my wife was being cold and that I needed to step up. I told her she needed to accept that she'd created this mess, and I wasn't going to clean it up. That's when my dad jumped on the phone, yelling that I was ungrateful and disrespectful. "You owe this family more than you realize," he shouted. I snapped. I told him, "No, what I owe is to my own family, my wife, my future kids. I don't owe you or sister a damn thing. If you think I'm going to sacrifice my happiness for the disaster you created, you're delusional." Then I hung up. A week later, my sister reached out. She left me a long voicemail, saying she was sorry for how everything turned out and that she wanted to fix things. But the way she said it rubbed me the wrong way. She didn't sound apologetic. She sounded desperate. I decided to meet her for coffee, more out of curiosity than anything else. When I arrived, she looked worn down, like life had chewed her up and spit her out. She started off with small talk, trying to ease into the conversation, but I cut her off. "Just tell me what you want," I said. She sighed and admitted she needed money. Apparently, her breakup with a fair partner left her in a terrible financial situation. She was behind on rent, her credit cards were maxed out, and she had no savings because she'd burned through everything during the divorce. I told her no. She stared at me, stunned. "You're seriously not going to help me?" "I'm your sister." "Exactly," I said. "You're my sister, and that's why I'm not helping you. You need to learn from your mistakes, not keep repeating them." She started to cry, saying she didn't know what else to do. I felt a pang of guilt, but I knew I couldn't enable her. "You have to figure this out on your own," I said. "It's the only way you'll grow." After that, I thought they'd finally leave me alone, but my parents decided to escalate things. They started calling extended family members, spinning a sob story about how I'd abandoned my sister in her time of need. They painted me as heartless and ungrateful, and some of my relatives bought into it. One of my aunts called me saying, "I don't understand why you're being so cruel. Family is supposed to support each other." I explained everything, the affair, the lies, the manipulation, and by the time I finished, she was speechless. "I had no idea," she said. "Your parents made it sound like you just didn't care." "That's what they do," I said. "They twist the truth to make themselves look better." Thankfully, she believed me, and she promised to set the record straight with the rest of the family. But my parents weren't done. They decided to take their entitlement to the next level. They filed a petition in small claims court, trying to sue me for money they claimed they'd lent me years ago. It was ridiculous. The money they were talking about was a gift they'd given me for my wedding, and there had never been any mention of repayment. I wasn't worried about losing the case, but it was the principle of the matter. They were so desperate to control me that they were willing to drag me through legal nonsense. I hired a lawyer, and the case was thrown out almost immediately. The judge even scolded my parents for wasting the court's time. I thought that would be the end of it, but my parents couldn't let it go. They started telling people I'd stolen from them, further tarnishing my reputation. At that point, I decided I'd had enough. It was time to hit back. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, texts, emails, financial records, and I compiled a detailed account of everything they'd done. Then I sent it to every family member who'd been caught in their web of lies. I laid everything out, from their involvement in my sister's affair to their attempts to manipulate me and my wife. The backlash was immediate. My parents started getting calls from angry relatives demanding answers. Their carefully constructed narrative fell apart, and people began to see them for who they really were. Even better, brother-in-law found out about the smear campaign they'd started against him. He filed a defamation lawsuit, and this time my parents couldn't weasel their way out. They had to settle, and the financial hit was significant. The final nail in the coffin came when my parents tried to guilt me one last time. My mom called, crying, saying they'd lost everything and that it was my fault. "No," I said. "It's your fault. You chose to support sister's bad decisions. You chose to lie and manipulate. You chose to destroy this family. Now you're just dealing with the consequences." And I hung up. Now my wife and I are focused on building our own family, free from the toxicity of my parents and sister. The peace is incredible. Sure, I miss the idea of a happy, united family, but I've learned that some people just can't be saved from themselves. Karma has a funny way of working things out, doesn't it? If you're here for more stories about entitled people getting what they deserve, hit that subscribe button. You won't regret it.